So back in 1991, the small Japanese development studio Soft Machine was best known for racing games, pachinko games, bowling games. Definitely not the studio that you would expect to come out with the next big Zelda killer. But that's exactly what they did with Grandmaster. Grandmaster is a semi-nonlinear action RPG with 5 selectable levels where you can choose what order you complete the levels in. And each level contains its own enemies, its own traps, its own items that you can pick up, which will help you either in combat or even in level access. And what's really interesting is that the order in which you select the levels will actually affect the storyline as it goes through, which is one of Grandmaster's most defining traits. So as you play through for your first time, you're unlikely to see certain key scenes that will change the outcome of the game for you. So I start up Grandmaster for the first time, and the level that is selected by default is the castle. So I think, hey, might as well try that one first, right? So I go into the castle, I fight a couple of enemies. I realize very quickly that my sword swing is, let's call it slow. And that's a little concerning, but I start to get the hang of the rhythm and all of that until I die. So I restart in the castle, I get a little bit further, I fall into a pit and I die. Oh no, is it going to be one of those games? Well, third time's the charm. I go in, kill a couple more monsters, and level up, and realize that Grandmaster is a game with a experience-based leveling system, unlike Legend of Zelda, but more like a Final Fantasy or a Dragon Quest in that regard. So I continue to explore the castle, and I start finding item upgrades. So I find a sword upgrade, makes my sword a bit stronger. That is a lifesaver, makes the combat much easier. Then I find a cross, which makes my sword swing faster. Now, instead of kind of the slow, clumsy swing, I have something that feels a little bit more like The Legend of Zelda, and now we're rocking. So I explore this castle, which is itself a small, contained, open world, until I find a key and a boss door. Go into the boss door, fight the gargoyle. It's pretty tough, but at this point, I've got 4, 5, 6 levels up, and I can take out the boss fairly easily. He's got a simple pattern, not too bad. This is when I'm presented with the Ninja Gaiden style cutscene, where I meet the knight Terry, and he kind of tells me a bit more about the world that we're in. So his kingdom was destroyed by Dante, who is the ultimate bad guy. And there are these crystals, these marks, I think they call them, scattered around the world, which when collected, all of them, they give you the ultimate power. Usual Japanese role-playing game type stuff, right? But given that this is a story told not just by little characters running around the map, but instead in real, like Ninja Gaiden style cinematic cutscenes, makes this feel kind of a step above what we're used to seeing in 8-bit role-playing games. My next stop in the tour of the kingdom is a snowy mountaintop with an ice palace on top. So I start exploring the ice palace, and this level is actually considerably easier than the castle was, but maybe that's just because I leveled up. I fight these weird yellow jello-like ice cubes that chase me around, very strange enemy. And I find axes, which actually show me why I have magic points. Apparently throwing an axe uses magic points. But the axes are a long-distance attack, which actually helps a whole lot with some of the combat in this game. So the Ice Palace has an interesting layout. There's a lot of places where you can see a chest, but it's behind spikes or something, and you have to work your way through the maze and figure out how to get to that chest. But I find the key, I find the door, go in, fight this huge ice golem, who, honestly, not a great boss battle, because the best way to kill him is to just stand next to him and swat your sword as fast as possible. But I destroy the ice golem easily, And that's when I go to another one of these Ninja Gaiden style cutscenes, this time where I'm talking to a princess in a mysterious place that appears to be in some sort of a cage or something. And this is Princess Cyrena, the girl who I'm ultimately on my quest to save. Now, it mentions that I don't know where she is, but I can speak to her through this crystal in this ice palace, and that she has been captured by Dante. All right, so now we need to not only go destroy Dante, but we have to find and save the princess. So now we're off to the next area. The next leg of my journey takes me to the cave. Now, the cave is a beautiful environment for an 8-bit game. Running water, lots of waterfalls, the whole screen is alive with movement. And it just makes for a really great immersive space that almost feels more like a 16-bit RPG than what we would compare to most 8-bit games of its era. So I'm exploring through the cave and I find a magic rod. And this thing casts magic spells that shoot out in all directions and do a ton of damage to the enemies. Incredibly useful, especially in the kind of the winding pathways of this cave. And I make my way up to find the key, get to the door, go inside, and fight a ninja. Odd choice for a boss in a cave, but he starts out just seeing like a little snorkel underwater, and he pops up out of the water, and then you just start taking out this ninja as he's hopping back and forth, chucking, throwing daggers at you, being quite obnoxious. But again, not too hard of a boss. I'm starting to find a pattern here. The bosses in this game, not too terribly difficult. But I beat the ninja, and as he's collapsed on the floor, bleeding, he mentions my sister. Oh, I have a sister. Okay. Well, that must be important sometime later. So I move on to the tower stage. And the tower kind of has, I don't know, to me it kind of feels a little bit more like an old Aztec temple, although I'm not entirely sure that's what they were going for. But I'm climbing up this tower and fighting little wizards and stuff, and I find a morning star. And the morning star is kind of a mid-distance weapon, as opposed to the axe being thrown clear across the screen. This one only goes about 3 character lengths in front of you, longer than the sword. But what's cool about the morning star is it can sometimes get multiple hits, and it doesn't take magic points. So I continue on, and I reach a pit that I cannot cross, and I almost turn back until I realize the morning star is a hook shot. Yep, this game straight up stole the hook shot from The Legend of Zelda. I use it, and I zip my way across the pit and continue on up the tower. Now, I reach the part where I can go inside the tower, and this part gets a little bit frustrating because there are sections of conveyor belts that have spikes at the end of them, and you have to ride the conveyor belt and step off just in time to not run into the spikes. But the controls don't really let you do that. So I generally would just figure out the path that would get me the least number of spikes in the butt in order to make it through that room. Not my favorite section of the game. But continue on, find the key, which is this time is just on the main path, really easy to find, and make it to the boss door and go inside. To find a fully armored Medusa, and she is tough. She's throwing everything she's got at me. The best thing I can do is just dive in and hit her a few times in the hopes that I can do some damage, but I managed to take her down to, I think, half health, and the armor breaks, and she's naked. So keep fighting, keep taking her out, finally take her down to her last health, and she explodes and transforms into a fully nude woman laying in the middle of the floor. This is very, very odd for an NES game. But what's even more odd is that I take the mark and I leave her on the floor and I walk away. What a jerk. I've got one level left. It is a pyramid. The first thing I notice when I enter this pyramid is just how strange the music is. You see, this whole game has had a pretty good soundtrack, if a bit repetitive. Each song is only like a 15 to 20 second repeating loop of music, but it's always been kind of interesting melodies. But here in the Pyramid, it almost sounds like two genres of music are fighting with each other over dominance of the overall soundtrack. It has this really strange, unworldly sound to it. If I start exploring this pyramid and I find some armor, and I wish I had gone to the pyramid sooner, because the armor cuts down how much damage I'm going to take, which is just as good as getting even more levels up. So fantastic items that are making the game way, way easier to make it through. And I'm able to go through the entire pyramid in a single run because of it. I'm exploring the pyramid, trying to find the key, go through a teleport, start walking down the hallway, and it just cuts me to another cutscene, which is the first time the game has introduced a cutscene mid-level to me. But I find a locket on the ground that belonged to my sister. Ha! I knew that would be important. I take the locket, I go off, I find the key, I get to the door, I get to the boss, and the boss is, kind of expectedly at this point, my sister. And she has been like corrupted by Dante, the devil lord, and fight her and defeat her, and his usual kind of dramatic, oh, I've now learned too late that I was wrong sort of moment before she dies. Game cuts from there straight to a scene of me flying away on a dragon up into a completely new, like, high-tech city in the sky. Now, if this sounds familiar, it's probably because you've played Crystallis. Because this is literally the exact same way that Crystallis ends, of moving up into the city in the sky with high technology and robots for the final act of the game. Compared to the rest of the game, this final dungeon is massive. First area is this big kind of almost stack of machines that you're climbing up, fighting robots, using your hookshot to solve, or I guess Morningstar, to solve these hookshot puzzles and get yourself across the gaps to try to figure out how to get up to the top, all the while being bombarded by enemies who keep respawning. Pretty tough run, to be honest. And I make it to the end and I fight the gargoyle boss. Oh no, is this going to be a boss rush? Nope. I finish the gargoyle boss, I go to the next area, and it's a whole new dungeon that now has me going through all these strange, like, almost physics changes within the game. There's a room that forces me to moonwalk, and when I attack in the opposite direction that I'm moving. There's a room that has like statues that suck me toward the statues and try to pull me into pits. It's this like funhouse maze of gameplay changes. And I reach the end of that, and I fight. Yep, that's the ice golem again. Oh, this is a boss rush, but it's a boss rush that has a different level before each boss. So I continue through fighting off each boss in turn. The next area is actually a maze. And, it's a maze. By that I mean it is a multi-screen monstrosity of a maze. And you walk slow enough that this section is exhausting. And by the time I reach the end of this maze, I could not wait to move to the next spot. Easily the worst section of the entire game. But luckily, I make it to the end of it, make it through the next boss, go to the fourth area, and what the heck is happening in those stained glass windows? I don't want to know. I'm out. Now this area is where I found one of the strangest, worst telegraphed puzzles in the game. So there are these gaps and these posts, and in here, and I'm like, I can't jump. How do I make it across these gaps? I'm like, ooh, maybe if I use my hook shot and I launch myself halfway, but then let go real quick, I'll stop on the next platform. And you can see that worked. That made me cross the gaps. but it was incredibly difficult to do so. Come to find out later, there is an invisible point that you can hookshot over at the side of the screen, which will carry you right up to the top. And I think that's the official solution to this puzzle? I don't know. I finally made it to the end either way. So as in every area, I find the key, I make it to the door, and there's another door behind it. And that door won't open. No matter what I try, that door will not open. I'm greeted with one final cutscene that tells me I did something wrong. Now I can't open the door. Game over. I guess that's the end, right? No way. No way. Not at the time I put into this game. I'm figuring this door out. How do I get in this door? This time I start in the cave. I go through the cave and I find a little passage that I never went down last time. At the end of that passage is Terry, the knight, the same guy I met at the end of the castle sequence the first time that I played through the game. But he's dying. With his dying breath, he tells me about his sister who's been cursed and is now at the tower, and that I need to be the one to save her. So I return to the tower, but this time around, I'm not max level. I'm kind of mid-level because I've started over, which makes the tower way harder, and the Medusa boss way harder. But when I take her down, remember that naked woman? Well, now I know who that woman is. That's Terry's sister. So at the end of the level, you take off your cloak, you put it over her, and then the level ends. I didn't just leave her behind. I move on. Next I go to the castle, continue on from there, still fight my sister. I feel like, I don't know, is that right? I make it back to that door in the final dungeon. And Terry's sister, Freya, shows up and is able to magically open the door for me. Yes, I can continue. Final section almost goes full on platformer with me, having me use the hookshot at the end of a conveyor belt in order to make it across a pit. It's got walls you have to walk through. It's got just kind of the last bits of crazy stuff that they could come up with before the final boss. I reached the final boss, and I meted with Princess Cyrena on a crucifix. We've hit the trifecta. We've got blood, we've got nudity, we've got religious references, and I now understand why this game never came to the US. That was not okay in 1991 Nintendo Land. I meet Dante finally. I fight Dante. Fairly difficult boss battle, but able to take him down on my first try and finish the game. And what kind of grand, epic ending are we going to get to this game that had high-quality cinematics for its time and a multiple-ending, branching storyline? We get a close-up of Princess Cyrena with the wrong hair color, and then a silhouette shot of the two of them embracing in front of cherry blossoms. That's our ending. Kind of a bit lackluster for the amount that went into the story for the entire rest of this game. That said, I came away from Grandmaster incredibly impressed by what they were able to pull off on the aging NES/Famicom hardware. This game feels like almost a next-gen Zelda. This game has non-linear story with a couple secret scenes, a couple branches, but enough to really feel like playing it again gave me all sorts of new information I didn't have before. This game has a bunch of different types of items which are actually useful in combat. It has mostly interesting boss fights, and then it has, especially when you get to that final dungeon, has a whole lot of unique types of puzzles that they have figured out, even ones that mess with your controls and your physics entirely. On top of that, absolutely beautiful graphics for the 8-bit era. Catchy music, if a bit repetitive, but very catchy. Great cutscenes. This is the full package. And while the combination of being a small developer, small publisher, and questionable content in places is probably the reasons this never made it to the US, I cannot fathom why this has not become an absolute staple for Famicom collectors, because this is the exact definition of a hidden gem. A really well done, polished, interesting game that nobody is talking about. You can see that in any of the footage that I've used here, I have been using an English translation patch. There is one available out there. I'll put the link down in the description. I highly recommend that if you are an 8-bit action RPG fan and you're done with Zelda and looking for something a little bit different and a little more advanced, come check out Grandmaster. This game, I was expecting good things when I put it in, and it still impressed me going over the top with what I was actually expecting this game to deliver. So if you like the review, definitely love it if you hit the like button down there. If you want to see more content like this, please hit subscribe. Please ring the bell next to it. It means the world to me also. If you would comment down below, let me know what you think. And if you have any ideas for any other videos you'd like to see, just let me know down in the comments section. I thank you for your time, and you have a great day.